First of all, I am so honored to be here. Again, I was here a year and a half ago, I think, which was so much fun. And I'm so glad to have been asked back. And when I got the email telling me that the All American was the one City One book selection, I was so excited. So thank you to all the people who work in this library system and in this beautiful building. One of my favorite things is to research. And so for the All American, I did a lot of research on the 1950s. And getting ready for this talk today, I looked into the 50s even more because nerds like me have a hard time stopping. The 1950s are so fun because there were poodle skirts and bobby socks, saddle shoes, which now if you want to buy a pair of saddle shoes, they're like $50. It's ridiculous. It was the era of sock hops and doo-wops and the infancy of rock and roll. It was a decade of great innovation. NASA was founded, and it was the start of the space race. There was a cure for polio that was invented, which I know made an enormous difference to everyone. The first organ transplant happened in the 50s, and as we all know, TVs ended up in everyone's homes. Everybody have a TV? And all of the things that happened since the TV to the internet, all of that, not in the 50s, the internet, but you know what I mean. And so many social changes happened in the 50s. We think of the 60s as being this enormous time of social change. The 50s were too. It was what led to the 60s, obviously. Vast economic prosperity, the Korean War, Queen Elizabeth took the throne in England, and it was the beginning of the civil rights movement. And my favorite, it gave us TV shows like Ozzie and Harriet, Bonanza, The Twilight Zone, Perry Mason, Leave It to Beaver, and I Love Lucy. And I do love Lucy. The 1950s, as I'm sure you know, was an incredibly complex and sometimes adorable decade. I mean, look at the Chevy Bel Air. It's the cutest car in the world. And I am very thankful for the 50s for bringing our great state, the amazing city of Livonia. So happy birthday, Livonia. One of the questions that I get asked a lot about the All-American is how I came up with the idea for it. And it is a very complicated answer. And it goes all the way back to 2020. Do you guys remember 2020? It was an insignificant year, wasn't it? But at the time, I was listening to a book on my audiobook called A Good American Family by David Maraniss. And this book is about, it's nonfiction, it's about a man who was a little boy in the 50s, and his father was a journalist, and he was accused of being a communist. In 1952, there were all of these hearings of the House Un-American Activities Committee, and his father had to testify in front of the congressional hearing in Detroit. The way that they found out about David Maraniss's father was that there was this woman named Bernice Baldwin, and Bernice was a retired nurse. She was a widow. She was a grandma. She was tiny, and she was just an average, ordinary lady who had infiltrated the Communist Party of Detroit for 9 years as a spy for the government. Her job in the Communist Party was to take roll during the meetings. And so she had everyone's names. And she went to Washington, D.C., and testified in front of Congress and said, I've got all these names. And Congress was like, oh, goody. Because at the time, they were trying to root out everything that had anything to do with communism. When she came back to Detroit, the House Un-American Activities Committee set up shop here in Michigan. And what they did was they took her list of names and they interrogated people. And they asked people, if you name just 5 people who were involved in communism, this will be a lot easier for you. That's what happened to David Marinus' father, Elliot. The problem was, Elliot was not a communist. He had family members who were. He, in the 30s, was interested in new forms of economy because it was the 30s and everything was falling apart. And a lot of people like him who were curious or had questions were being accused of being communists. People were being outed by neighbors for just asking a question or saying something that sounded a little funny. People's houses were being bugged, and that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it was real. They actually did that. It was a very scary time. And when I was doing the research in 2020 of what the Red Scare was, my question to myself was, if I were in that position of having been accused, would I have said names of other people? And it is very easy from my in 2020, I just was in my house, in my warm house with my kids, watching Marvel movies all the time. It was very easy from that position to say, oh, I would never do that. That wouldn't be the right thing to do. But these were people who their livelihoods were in threat. They were risking everything. These were people who would have been chased out of town, who were tormented and ostracized by their communities. And there were people, the Rosenbergs, who were actually executed for their involvement. So it's very easy for me to say, no, I wouldn't, but I'm a mom, and I wouldn't want to give up their lives, their comfortable lives in their schools for something like that. So I don't know what I would have done. And that's a really hard thing to realize about yourself, because that's an extreme situation. The Marinus family, he lost his job at the Detroit Free Press. He was escorted out, and everybody knew why he lost his job. When he went to testify in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee, he was not allowed to speak unless he were confessing or pointing a finger at someone else. So he was not allowed due process. He was accused, and he relocated. Fortunately, he did not go to jail. He went to Wisconsin, which, just kidding. I love Wisconsin because cheese. But then, all of a sudden, the Red Scare ended. There were no apologies issued to the people who had been accused, to the people who had been imprisoned, whose lives had been upended. It was just dropped. And I think that's a huge injustice. The Red Scare was the result of those in power creating an us versus them dynamic and playing on people's fears in order to control them. And it is a black mark on our nation's history. It really is. So when I was doing that very heavy research, reading that very, very heavy book, I was also reading another book. It's this one. It's called The Incredible Women of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League by Anika Arak. And this one is so much happier. So this is why I talk about this second. Get the heavy stuff out and then talk about the fun stuff. This is about the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And as I was reading it, it has all of these adorable illustrations, and it has the stories from the women's, in the women's words, the stories of their time playing professional baseball. And I would love to tell you more about them because it's way more fun. In 1942, Philip Wrigley had an idea because a lot of the Major League Baseball players, the men, were going to war, or because they suspended the league for a little while. He thought the country needs some morale building. And what builds morale better than baseball if your team is winning? And, and so he decided, well, we've got Rosie the Riveters in the factories. Why not have them on the ball field? So he sent talent scouts all across the country and even into Canada to find women and girls who played baseball. They were looking for between the ages of 15 to 24. That's it. And they recruited all of these women to come. They had hundreds of women audition in their hometowns. The ones that made it past that, 75 came to Chicago for spring training to try out. And of those 75, 60 women made it. They started the league with 4 teams. Does anyone know the teams? Racine Bells, the Rockford Peaches, Kenosha, not Grand Rapids yet, Kenosha Comets, and then the South Bend Blue Sox. The Grand Rapids came just a couple years later. The Chicks started in Milwaukee first, and then they came to the best city for them, which is Grand Rapids, which is where I live. They would have been my team. I love the Grand Rapids Chicks. Those 4 original teams, they started the league. The season went from April, which was spring training, to September when the championship was. And part of the spring training, of course, was playing baseball and running drills and all of those things. But another part of it was charm school. So these women and girls, many of them were farm girls. Almost every single one of them were major tomboys. I was a major tomboy. I didn't know how to sit in a chair until I was 15. So they had to go and learn how to walk like a lady. They would walk around with the books on their heads. They would learn how to sip tea with their pinky out. They would learn how to do their hair and makeup because Philip Wrigley wanted them to play like men and look beautiful like models, because he knew that that combination would make people come to the games. After a few years, they gave up on the charm school, though, because they realized it was a lost cause. Throughout the history of the league, there were sets of rules that the girls had to follow. For instance, they could not fraternize with the other teams. The reason for that is that they were constantly stealing each other from each other's teams to come play over here. They were not allowed to wear jeans or pants in public. So they would be on the bus traveling from one city to the next, and they'd be wearing their pants. When they'd roll into town, the bus driver would yell, "Ladies, put your skirts on." They'd shimmy a skirt on over their jeans and roll up their pant legs so nobody would see them. When on the field, they had to wear their skirts at a certain length, not too short, but not too long, because, they had to be a little bit short to get the men to come to the games. They had to wear red lipstick at all times. If they didn't, they were fined $5. So they always had extra tubes of it in the dugout. They could not go out on a date without permission from the chaperone. Each team had a woman who was the team mom, and she was keeping an eye on them. Unless they had certain permission, they had to be in bed 2 hours after the game ended. No exceptions. And you know what? There were so many more rules. But these women kept those rules. They did not go around messing around. In a league of their own, they go to that bar and they do the dancing thing, and the one woman sings like surprisingly well. They didn't do stuff like that. These women knew that they had to prove something. They had to prove that they were as good at baseball as men. They had to prove that they were serious. And they had to show a professionalism because they wanted this league to go forward. They played 8 games a week, every weeknight, and a double header on Sundays. The only day off they got, Saturday, but they were traveling usually, or if it rained. That's it. But they didn't mind. They loved it. They were making between $45 and $80 a week, which back then was quite a lot. And some of them were making more money than their parents. So a big chunk of that money went home. Eventually, the league expanded to 10 teams, and Grand Rapids got the Chicks, Battle Creek got the Bells, Kalamazoo got the Lassies, and Michigan actually had a good showing. I'm just surprised that Detroit didn't have a team. That has always surprised me. The games drew in between 2,000 and 3,000 spectators. That is something. That is a big deal. The players were as good and sometimes better than some of the men. There were some of the women who were being scouted by the major league, the men's major league, to come play with the men. And they all said no, because they wanted to build up the women's league and really make it something. There was a player on the Grand Rapids Chicks, and her name was Marie Ziegler, and her nickname was Little Zig, because everyone had a nickname, which I really adore. And Little Zig, she played for the Grand Rapids Chicks one season. It was the summer between her junior and senior year in high school. When Little Zig was on the Grand Rapids Chicks, she was a professional athlete, and that was 1953. When she went back for her senior year of high school, she could not play any sports because the best they had was a club, an athletic club for girls. And what they did was they would talk about the boys' sports. And if they were lucky, they got to play basketball on half the court because running was not good for girls. So they thought. So here's this woman who is a professional athlete who couldn't play high school sports. And I look back at my high school years and how many sports I played badly, but I still played them. And I just am so grateful because Little Zig, she blazed a path for me to play sports in high school and for my daughter to do sports in high school. And that I just am so grateful to these women. Unfortunately, in 1954, the league folded. There are several reasons for that. One of the reasons is that the league changed structure and it just never was organized the way it was before. Another is that the Major League Baseball was back and in full swing, and people would prefer to go to those games. And the third reason, and the biggest reason, is that everybody had a TV, and so they weren't going out as much. The good news is that just this year, there were tryouts for the Women's Professional Baseball League. Oh, I don't know why that makes me emotional. And it is going to have its first season next summer. And that is so exciting to me. Hundreds of women from all across the world came to try out. And even a Michigander, a 19-year-old girl, she is eligible for the draft. She made it through. So that, I'm just so excited. And last week, the remaining women who are still alive, who play the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, went and visited the tryouts, which I think is just so great. One of them is Mary Moore, who lives in the Detroit area. She is incredible, and she speaks at libraries sometimes. If you ever get the chance, please go see her. She is 92 or 93, and she is so funny, and she has so much to share. And it seems like every other month or so, we hear about another All-American girl who has passed away. So we need to be listening to them. They have so much wisdom to give us and so many funny stories to tell. Writing this book, The All-American, was an honor of a lifetime. The experience of writing it was so hard, and it was so emotional, and just has given me so much in my personal life. I was saying earlier that usually when a book releases, it has about 6 months of attention. And this book, it's been out for over 2 years, and people are still reading it, and that just warms my heart. I do need to tell you, though, it's not just about baseball. There is a sister. Her name is Flossie. Would you like to meet her? You do. Okay, trust me. When I was writing this book, it was originally only supposed to be about the sister Bertha, who plays baseball for the fictional team, the Workington Sweet Peas. And her sister decided to take over, and she demanded to have half the book. And I said no, and she got it. Because, believe it or not, we do not control our characters. They control us. Okay, so I'm going to read to you from chapter 2. Flossie, it's important to know, is 11. Okay. I couldn't have known from personal experience. I'd never been to the principal's office before, but rumor had it that Principal Braun kept a paddle that he used on very naughty children. I'd even heard that it had holes drilled into it so it would leave welts. There was a story that one boy was so scared that he wet his pants right when Mr. Braun lifted the paddle. Then, from what I heard, he got another smack because he'd made a mess of the principal's slacks. I wasn't sure if any of that was true. Still, I'd made a stop at the little girl's room just in case. A girl couldn't be too careful. I stood just outside the office, biting my lower lip so I'd remember not to let it tremble, and I told myself over and over in my head that I was not going to cry. Not even if I got the paddle, not even if Mr. Braun said that he would have to call my mother. Holding my chin up, I walked into the office. Well, wobbled might have been the better word for it. I still wasn't used to wearing high heels. I handed Mrs. DeYoung, the school secretary, a note from my teacher, Miss Lang. Miss Lang hated me. Florence, Mrs. DeYoung said, clutching her pearls and looking me up one way and down the other. Oh, my. I grabbed the sides of my skirt and twisted the cotton between my fingers. I couldn't tell if oh, my was said in awe or pity. I'm supposed to see Mr. Braun, I said with the smallest little shake in my voice. Please? Okay. She got up from her chair and smoothed her skirt, the teacher's note still folded in her hand. While she was gone in the principal's office, I looked down, noticing the 2 rolled up wads of toilet paper I'd stuffed in my undershirt had gone a little cockeyed. Making sure nobody was looking, I did my best to adjust them. Florence, Mrs. DeYoung glanced down at my blouse and cleared her throat. Yes, I said, dropping my hands. Principal Braun will see you, she said. The lip I'd tried to remind to keep still started to tremble. Oh, here, dear, Mrs. DeYoung whispered. Then she used her own hanky to wipe under my mouth. Your lipstick is just a little smudged. It's my sister's, I whispered back. Is that so? Yes. Well, it's a very pretty color. She dabbed a spot near the corner of my lips. I think it might have gotten away from you a little. Thank you, I said. You've never gotten in trouble at school before, have you? I shook my head. And you're scared? She asked. I nodded. Well, that was all she said. Then she took me by the shoulders and turned me, pushing me into the principal's office. Mr. Braun was at his desk reading what I guessed was the note my teacher had sent me with. He didn't look up when I stepped in. Miss Harding, he said, have a seat. I did. And while I waited for him to read the note, honestly, how much had Miss Lang written? I searched the room for the paddle and decided he must have it hidden somewhere behind his desk because it wasn't in plain sight. He took off his reading glasses before looking at me. Oh, he said. I guessed he'd never seen an 11-year-old girl with a face full of makeup before and a shirt full of wadded up toilet paper. If only he could have seen the high heels on my feet, also full of wadded up toilet paper. A girl had to make up for her lack somehow. Miss Harding, do you have a paddle? I asked, the words out before I could even think about them. Excuse me? Do you have a paddle? I folded my hands together in my lap with holes drilled into it so it would give kids welts. Well, that's not why there are holes. Because if you're going to paddle me with it, I have a right to know. I pushed my lips into a thin line and squeezed my hands together all the harder. Miss Harding, in my 20 years as a principal, I have never paddled a little girl, he said. Now, would you like to tell me why Miss Lang sent you to the office today? As a matter of fact, I said, I'd rather not. I must insist that you do. He cleared his throat. How about we start with you telling me why you came to school dressed like this? Oh, I didn't come to school dressed like this. Beg your pardon? Well, of course, my mother wouldn't have let me leave the house like this, I said. I changed in the girls' room before the first bell. I see. He scratched the top of his head, which made me think he definitely didn't understand. That was fine. He was a man, so he didn't need to. Next, you'll want to know why I changed, I said. Is that correct? He nodded. I wanted to look older, a little more mature. I crossed my ankles. Being the smallest in my class is the pits, you know. I'm sure it is. He glanced at Miss Lang's note. Now, if you will, tell me about what happened with Iris Markowitz. Oh, I bit the inside of my cheek because I really didn't want to tell him about that. Iris Markowitz was the prettiest, best-dressed, most well-liked girl in our class. She thought that she was the smartest, but she was wrong. It was me. I was the smartest. Bertha had warned me not to brag about it, though, saying that nobody liked a know-it-all teacher's pet. Well, I wasn't there to make friends. At least that was what I told myself when I ate lunch all alone or heard girls talk about the slumber party I hadn't been invited to. Miss Harding, Mr. Braun said, what happened between you and Iris? She made fun of me, I said. The year before, the kids in my class had made up a song about me, which wasn't nice in the least. It was called Little Baby Bumpkin. They'd made up scads of verses that had me living in a pumpkin and marrying a munchkin. My big brother, Chippy, had told me not to let it get to me. Those kids were just trying to get my goat. Most days I could ignore them, keeping my nose firmly planted in a book. But that day, Iris had gone too far. She pointed out my toilet paper bosom and sang under her breath, but loud enough for most of the class to hear, a brand new verse of the Baby Bumpkin song. Little baby bumpkin sucking on her thumbkin, she'd sang. Never adored 'cause she's flat as a board. That was it. I couldn't take another second. What happened then? Principal Braun asked. I slapped her across her stupid face, I said. He blinked a couple of times real slowly like he didn't quite believe what he'd just heard. That's all, I said. Are you going to paddle me now? He squinted at me before shaking his head. No, Miss Harding, I am not, he said. What a relief. But, he said, I do believe I'll have to talk with your mother. Oh, no. You do not need to talk to my mother, I said. Florence, you may call me Flossie, I interrupted. Flossie, I've heard that you're a good student. He pushed his lips together hard, and it made the corners of his mouth turn down into a frown. But I make good grades, I said, not pointing out that I had the best grades in my entire class. That would have been arrogant. School is about more than good grades. What a thing for the principal of a school to say! Your teacher seems to think you haven't tried very hard to make friends. He held up the letter from Miss Lang, waving it in front of me. Don't you have any friends at all? Of course I do, I said. It wasn't a fib. Not entirely. I had plenty of friends, if the characters from books counted. Besides, Chippy was my friend. And sometimes Bertha, too. How about friends in your class? Mr. Braun asked. Oh, no, I answered, shaking my head. They don't like me at all. Why do you think that is? I couldn't tell you. Would it hurt to put forth a little effort, he asked, to make nice with them? Oh, the tip-tops of my ears felt like they were on fire, and that was the first sure sign that I was about to lose my temper. I had tried. Honest Abe, I had. I'd done everything I could think of to make Iris, be my friend. Earlier in the year, when all the girls in the class were wearing their hair in ponytails, I started having Ma'am put mine up in the morning. And then, when they all added ribbons to their hair, I found a pretty red one in Ma'am's sewing basket. Then, when they all cut their bangs, I did too. Never mind that Ma'am had the hardest time trying to get them even after the job I'd done with her sewing shears. Also, and I wasn't proud of it, but I'd even done Iris's homework. It hadn't mattered at the end at all. She was mean to me anyway. I'll bet Iris wants to be your friend, Mr. Braun said. She's a very nice girl, don't you think? No, I do not, I answered. She's horrible. Now, why would you say that? I reminded him as respectfully as I could of the Baby Bumpkin song. Oh, just good-natured teasing, he said. After all, sticks and stones may break my bones. He lifted his hand like he wanted me to finish the silly little rhyme, but I wouldn't do it. I bit my lips between my front teeth and shook my head. Oh, come now, Florence. I made a sound without opening my mouth. Surely you want to have friends, he said. I did, more than anything else in the world. So much that I couldn't help but burst into loud, heaving, messy tears just thinking about it. I didn't have a single friend in the whole world. Now, there, Mr. Braun said, pushing a box of tissues across the desk toward me. I didn't want his pity or his stupid tissues. I looked him right in the eye and reached down my shirt, grabbing both wads of toilet paper and used those instead. There's Flossie. I would love to answer any of your questions that you have. You can ask me anything, and I might answer some of them, but I will repeat the question for the camera. Yes. She asked about if the characters, if I used real human beings, or if they're all created, they're all fictional. So the town of Bonaventure Park, which is where they live in the beginning, is just outside of Detroit. It's a fictional town. And so these characters are all my imagination, just retelling the history. But Bertha is named for my great aunt, who was a Rosie the Riveter in Lansing. She worked in some of the car factory, and I think it was Oldsmobile. I might be wrong, but I believe it was that. And she, I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but she was my favorite. And I like to think that if she played baseball, she would have been in the league. She was very athletic and so cool. And Flossie, the name Florence, it was my great grandma. And she would not have allowed anyone to call her Flossie. But I think the name Flossie is the most adorable thing in the world. So Yeah. Hmm. Thank you. Why did I use a fictional town? Here's why. Because if you use a real town and you get something wrong, you hear about it. It's it's a lot more difficult. It terrifies me because if you say, oh, they went down the street and the street didn't run north south, you know, so that's why that just makes my job easier. I guess I'm lazy. Maybe that's what it is. Mhm. Oh, what influenced me to have an English mom? That was my great grandma. She immigrated from the north of England, and I never got to meet her. And so often in fiction, I will write family members loosely based on the family member, um, just to kind of feel connected to them in a strange way. I don't know if that makes sense or if that's weird, but that's why I've always been fascinated by my heritage. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was. She was. Ma'am was just a delight to write, and I by the end I was like, I want to be a mom like her. Like I want to be that kind of mom. I'm not sure if I am, but I would love to be. Did I have contact with? I did not have contact with them beforehand. It was um, it was very difficult to track them down until after the book was published, and then the All American Girls Professional Baseball League found out about me, and I think that I earned trust that way. So I have met one, and that was Mary Moore, and she it was like meeting a rock star. But I had incredible resource materials. Grand Valley State University years ago interviewed a whole bunch of the players um, and video recorded it. And so you can find it on YouTube and you can just watch these women and just hear the voices and see like their personalities. And that was fantastic material. And there were some really great books um, in which the women told their stories in their own words, which I think is so much more valuable than someone retelling it in a nonfiction book or even maybe fiction. Did not. I did not. Unfortunately, I was on a very tight deadline, so there were some restrictions to the research that I was able to do. I would love to connect with them and maybe give them a book. Yeah, yeah. See if they'll sell them in the gift shop. Mhm. Yeah, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. No, not yet. Why did I do a difficult thing? Okay, so um, for the TV, I'm not going to say, but there is a difficult thing in it. It's a very sad thing. Um, I knew from the beginning that that was what was going to happen. I did my best to change it in the storyline. And whenever I did that, the story fell apart. It didn't work. The story was resisting me, which might sound funny because I should be in control, but I'm not somehow. I still don't understand it. It infuriates me. So as angry as you were with me, I was even more angry at myself and devastated that I couldn't fix it. And there is a scene where Flossie says, "Why can't I change this?" And those were my words that I put in Flossie's mouth because I was devastated. Um, these things happen sometimes in my books, and every time I'm like, I wish that that wouldn't be what happened in the story. Um, but unfortunately, in life, there are a lot of things that don't go the way I want, and it's dumb because it shouldn't happen, right? Our lives should be happy. We should all get happy endings. We should all But unfortunately, very few of us get the exact ending that we wanted, and sometimes that's better. Thank you for the. I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm glad you're here anyway. Thank you. No, no, thank you. Oh, yeah. Yes. So the ending is a little obscure. I'm going to tell you if you there are a few strings that are not tied up. And the reason is because Flossie is learning the lesson throughout the story that that's how books are sometimes. They don't tie into little bows, and so that was the purpose of it. I didn't realize that people would be so confused by that and like very like what happens to these people? Are they do they end up do they get married? I'm like I don't even know what if you want them to, then congratulations to them. But that, yes. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. Oh, Uncle Matthew. Yes. So Uncle Matthew is a mysterious-ish character who he warms up. But in the beginning, he's very standoffish. And at the time, they wouldn't have had a name for it. But now he likely would have been considered on the spectrum. I have had several family members who I look at and I'm like, huh, that's why, that's probably what was going on. That's why they kept to themselves or did things a certain way or thought in like a way that my brain doesn't. And it was, I wanted to present a character like that and to kind of honor people I love who just their brains astound me. And Uncle Matthew's brain astounds me. And just how he showed compassion to especially Flossie, because they were very different people. Uncle Matthew, he will always be a very special character to me. On the spectrum, the autism spectrum disorder. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can ask me about the writing. Oh, yes. No, you're good. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right, right. I did not. Okay, so the question was during my research, did I read about children being mistreated because of being perhaps labeled a communist or their parents? I didn't read any specific instances, but there were mentions of children having to leave their school or leave their neighborhood because the bullying was bad. And I worked with children for a long time in a daycare situation and in children's ministry. Some kids can be really mean. And so I just imagined how kids would respond. And I remember being a kid and having kids who were going through something and other kids just kind of listened to what their parents said about somebody else and weren't very nice. So that's where that came from. And in the book, there is an instance of bullying. Yes. Mm-hmm. So in the book, it is Flossie and Bertha. They take turns writing chapters because Flossie would have taken over the whole thing if I had let her. So I had to keep her to every other. I enjoy writing in first person because to me, there's an intimacy with a character that I can't obtain through third person. Now, I can read third person and feel intimacy with characters, but I can't write that way. So my process, I always have written, all of my novels are in third or for first person. Um, I just really like to be in character when I'm writing. Um, that's how it works. And not all of my books go back and forth. It depends on what the story demands. Some books are fine with one narrator, and some need a couple. Yeah, and I don't ever know until I'm in the middle of writing what the book wants. Just again, infuriating. Oh, okay. Yeah. I am currently writing a book, and I am being very protective of the theme. But what I can tell you is that it is set in Michigan. I'll even tell you it's set in Western Michigan. And it's, that's all I can tell you. Because if I say too much about it, then I don't have the urgency to write it because I've already told the story. So, but I will say that my local library has been very helpful in research, and I have sworn that librarian to secrecy because she said, I noticed you have a lot of holds. And I said, yes. And she said, are you writing about the holds? And I said, yes. And she said, I won't tell anyone. And I was like, okay. And she said, can you tell me more? And I'm like, no, no. But librarians are my favorite because they help me so much. There are 3 eras. Oh, yeah. So the research is going to, it's going to be an intricate structure, and all female protagonists, and all in the same family. So there, I told you some stuff. So yeah, yeah. Plug newsletter. I will try and write one. Yes, but it will be a while before it comes out. A long time. Yes. She asked what the process was, like what comes first. Often a nugget of an idea comes first. So for instance, The Nature of Small Birds, which is, that book was my pandemic book. That's what I was writing while we were all in my very small house. That book, I got the idea for that. I was researching for all manner of things. I'm plugging so many books right now. Thank you. All Manner of Things is set during the Vietnam War. And so I was doing a lot of research about the Vietnam War, and I came across an article about how in 1975, 3,000 children from Vietnam were airlifted to be adopted in America, Australia, and Canada. And I just thought, well, there's a story. And I can't use it in All Manner of Things because it's the wrong timeline. So that was 1967, that would be 1975. So what I did is I printed the article, and I have a big folder that is, it says future ideas. And I stuck it in there, and I came to a point where I needed some ideas, and I went through that folder, and I said, oh, that. So I picked that up, and then I started doing research. And as I research, often the characters, I start getting ideas for characters. So I take lots of notes, and there's a lot of like highlighters and post-it notes and like notebooks and YouTube videos and everything like that. So the research often leads me to the story and the characters. For Bertha and Flossie, however, I have had those 2 characters tucked away for years, waiting for the right novel. Because I knew there were sisters named Bertha and Flossie. I didn't know what they were like. I knew that they were going to have um, a lot of fun. Like I knew that there would be humor in it, but I was keeping them, and this book was the right book. So that was a unique situation. Um, and then Stories That Bind Us, I will tell you this one. This one was crazy. I couldn't come up with an idea. I pitched so many ideas. My editor was like, no, no, no. 30 some ideas, all no. And I had a contract, and the time was ticking away. Came to Detroit with my family, went to Belle Isle, and walked into the aquarium. And something about the ceiling, because it's that shaded, it's beautiful. I walked in and I looked up, and the whole idea, the entire idea of the story popped in my head. And I said to my husband, when we get back to the hotel, I have to email my editor. And I said, this is the story idea, and you can't say no. And this is why. And so that's never happened before. It will likely never happen again. And the book was really hard to write. It wasn't easy. I was hoping it would be. But Stories That Bind Us. It is about a woman who is widowed at 40 and has to rebuild her life, and meets her nephew that she didn't know. And so they use stories to kind of heal their hearts in a lot of ways. And they do go to Belle Isle, and they go in the aquarium. Yes. The word Bonaventure for the little town that they live in, how did I come up with it? I think, and this is really wacky, but one day I was like, oh, that sounds good. And then I realized that there's like a road near my house that's called Bonaventure, and I drive by it, and somehow it just popped, like it just stuck in my head, and I didn't realize it. And then, oh, huh, that's how. It is a very nice, like it sounds nice to me, and I like how it looks. But I'm sure there was some like explorer or something with the last name Bonaventure. I should look it up. But oh, that would make sense. Oh. Oh, really? That's so funny. It was a roller rink. That's even more fun. Oh, all right. I was a band. I guess it's a well used name. Oh, all right. There's the tie. Yes. The question is, if I have a storyline that goes back and forth, do I write all of Bertha and then all of Flossie? No, I write it as you read it. Because for me, it would be more work to try and weave them together and make it fit. And there are some themes that overlap. And so, yes, I write it in the order that you read it, because again, like I said earlier, I'm a little lazy. I don't want to do more work than I have to. That is a very good question. I do know some people who write the chunk and then they fit. And I'm like, oh, that sounds so complicated. I would lose something in it, I think. Michigan, I am unabashedly biased in Michigan. It's my favorite place. Um, I only have two stories that are not set in Michigan. The rest are all set in Michigan. Uh, A Cup of Dust is set in Dust Bowl, Oklahoma. And I just am fascinated by the Dust Bowl. And then a novella I wrote. I was contractually obligated to set it in New York City. So that's why it was, even though I was like, well, maybe they can move to Michigan. And my editor said, no. And I was like, but they can visit Michigan? And she said, you don't have enough time. Just write it in New York City. And I was like, but yes, um, I am a very proud Michigander. I every time I see people's little mitten decal on their car, I'm like, that's right. And I'm just gonna say right now, the Lions are making me so happy. My entire fantasy team is Lions. They're my whole fantasy team. I know, putting all my eggs in one basket, and I don't even care. But yes, and having been recognized by the Library of Michigan has been the biggest honor, and it has changed my life in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. She asked if I had a connection with anyone in my family that had polio. No, but I I remember just doing a lot of like reading about how many people were impacted by it, and I don't think that being born in the late '70s, growing up in the '80s, I didn't appreciate how really devastating and how terrifying it was. Um, and what it did to the body when someone had it. I just thought it was like a fever because we didn't learn about it in school. And so it's one of those things where it's something I don't want people to forget from history, that people went through this, and famous people. It didn't matter who you were. It was, if you were going to get it, you were going to get it. And I am so glad that that's not something that my kids had to worry about, or I had to worry about for my kids. Yeah, it was during the research of it. I just thought, being in one of those iron lungs, I can't fathom living like that. That must have been just horrible. Oh yeah, the sugar cube. I did read about that too. Yeah, and I think I remember my dad telling me about it at some point, and I was like, sugar cubes. Oh, that sounds great. But of course, I didn't register what it was. Last chance. If you're shy and you don't want to speak in front of everyone, I will be right there, and you can come talk to me down there. That's fine. Oh, yes. Most of them are, yes, that are up here. The nature of small birds is not. Uh, things were lost to COVID, and that was one of the things, is that it did not get an audiobook. But yes, and I believe they're all on Libby. Yeah, so I love Libby. I was just telling Mabel, I listened to a ridiculous amount of books on Libby. Mm. Oh, the cover. Here, I'll tell you something about covers. I don't have any control over the covers. I wish I were that great of a artist. Yes, and that was an artist that did that. Um, the publisher, they come up with a title often. They come up with a cover design, and that's good because I would not know how to do something like that. But my goal, I have certain goals, and one of them was to have a bird on the cover of my book, and I got it. And they said, I hope you don't mind a bird. And I was like, oh, trying to be real cool. And I was like, I don't mind at all. Sure. Sure. This is the Operation Baby Lift, where the children were airlifted from Vietnam to be adopted into Western homes. And this story, it's three different narrators. Bruce, who is the father who adopts the child, he is in 2013. Sunny, his daughter, that was his birth daughter, in the 1980s, growing up with having a sister that was adopted from another country, and Linda, who is the mom, in 1975 when they adopt. And so it goes, there's a pattern to it. So it alternates chapters. And the reason I wrote it that way is because adoption is not a story that happens in a 3-month period of time. It's a life. And so I wanted to represent that. And I will say the daughter who is adopted, her name is Mindy, she doesn't have a point of view. And people ask me questions about that a lot. The reason for that is that I am not Vietnamese and I am not adopted. So writing from her perspective would have felt too much like appropriating her. And so I had read a book by an Asian American woman who said, tell the story, but don't tell it for the character, tell it with the character. So that's why I did not give her a point of view. It was to honor her. Yes. Oh. Yeah. You're right. She asked about the timeline from idea to being done. Let me tell you, if I had my choice, infinite. Because I love research and I love editing and I could keep going, but you don't get paid if you never turn it in. When I have a contract, that is something that you negotiate when you're signing the contract. How long from signing it to delivery, to giving it to the editor? And generally, for me, it's been 1 year. Sometimes it's been shorter. Fortunately, when it was shorter, I already had a good chunk of the book written. A year is too fast for me these days. I have teenagers, and you know how that is. I like having 2 years because then I fully flesh out the characters and I have time to change things if it needs to happen. So right now I don't have a contract, so it's kind of nice because I can determine that. But I know I have friends who they'll write 5 books a year. They'll come out they'll have 5 books out a year, and I'm like, that's not happening. But good for them. Good for them. But I'm too slow. But then from the idea to turning it in, then there are multiple edits. So it goes through what's called a developmental edit, where an editor looks at the big picture of the story. And, this needs to change so that all of these things happen, or, the big picture and the story arc and all of that. Then after 2 or 3 rounds sometimes of that, then after that are the picky eagle eye, finding all the commas that are wrong. And this character had blue eyes, but now they have brown eyes. Fix it. Things like that. And that can go through several rounds. By the time you're done, you're sick of it. And then, you get one last chance to look at it, and that is the most terrifying thing because that's it. And even after all of those rounds of edits, there's always a typo. There's always. And it is, people say, well, I noticed on this page. I'm like, please don't tell me, please don't tell me. So if you ever find one, just think, I am so good because I found something an editor didn't, but don't tell me. Yes. Oh, do I ever argue with my editors in my head? But no, I don't. You are allowed to give your viewpoints. There have been times when I say this is non-negotiable. But generally, the editor is right. I have had just I've hit the jackpot with editors. They have been so good. They've known how to talk to me because they know that writers are very sensitive people. And so I think that if an editor comes to me with dignity and respect, I'm going to hear them out. And there have been a few times when I'm like, no, this is important to me, and this is why. And usually if you tell them this is why, they get it. I have heard of authors fighting with their editors, and those authors do not get contracts again because nobody wants to be treated badly. And there are so many people lined up waiting for contracts. They'd rather work with somebody that wants to work with them. I have heard editors say they would rather work with an author who is teachable than an author who is very talented and a diva. And I understand that. But in my head, sometimes I'm like, especially in those later edits where I'm like, for goodness sake. Yeah. But that is a good question because I think there's this stereotype of the author-editor relationship where it's very combative. And that's almost never the case. And my friends, I've got a lot of friends who write in different houses and things like that. And it's fortunately, editors are a lot nicer than they're portrayed in the movies. Mm-hmm. Oh, the question was, do I ever hear that somebody wants to make nibbles, that somebody wants to make it a film or a TV? No, that is so rare. Have you heard of Karen Dion? She writes thrillers. She lives in Michigan, and her book, The Marsh King's Daughter, which was a Michigan notable book, it was turned into a movie. And she told me about the process, and she said, I do not expect that it will ever happen again, but it was so cool that it did. So it's rare, and honestly, I'd be terrified because they change a lot. Karen was very happy with how her film turned out. But I've had other people I know who were very displeased because they changed just too much. And at that point, you cash the check and you sit back because you can't influence it at all. But you do get a check. So that is nice. But if it ever were to happen, I think that would be cool, but I'd be so afraid to go see it. You know what? That is so rare. I think maybe once or twice I've thought, yeah, that was better, but it's not usual. Yeah. No say over movie adaptations or any film adaptation. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a common experience. But no, you just cash that check. But in the contract, you say whether it can be optioned for film, and often it is optioned, and the film is never made, and so you don't get money, and then because it was optioned, it can't be picked up by anyone else. So it's real tricky, and also my agent handles all of that. Because I am so disorganized. I wouldn't know what to do. Yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. You are a great group of people. You have fantastic questions. So thank you so much.